The
This
police
is why
chief
we
and
come
what
to work every
update he
day
has to give us now.
as police officers to do two things. One, try everything we can to prevent violence against our community. We're very proud in the city of Austin we're the second safest city as it comes to violent crime, and that's by design. Our department spends a lot of time, energy, and effort in trying to keep the number one asset we have, and that's the people that live, work, and visit our city safe. And so we're putting this up to remind people what this is about. It's about bringing justice to the victims of a homicide. The first thing I want to do is I want to thank our team. Number one, our partners at the state DPS and the Texas Rangers have done a phenomenal job of assisting us since this investigation took us to the coast. Number two, I've got Special Agent Chad Creasy here, supervisory agent of the FBI here locally, that have been phenomenal. They're not only phenomenal partners in this case, but they're phenomenal partners, as is DPS, on all matters of public safety here in Central Texas and Austin. And then I want to really just say thank you to our homicide team. Our homicide investigators have done an amazing job. This man here and his partner Scanlon and the entire team has done a phenomenal job. These cases I'm about to describe, really, it was like a needle in a haystack. And when all the details come out and how these men and these group of investigators put together the pieces of this puzzle, I think this community will join me in really congratulating them on a work well done. Let's face it, in Austin, Texas, the possibility of being murdered by a stranger is very low, and that's why these violent crimes and these violent homicides has really shaken the foundation of our community. On December 6, 2014, at approximately 2013 p.m., 2013 in the afternoon, Austin police responded at 4605 Tamarack Trail in reference to a deceased person. Officers arrived and found a deceased female who suffered from apparent trauma. The victim was identified as Kathy Blair. An autopsy performed by the Travis County Medical Examiner's Office determined that the manner of death was a homicide. On December 15, 2014, at approximately 10:56 a.m., North Central Air Command officers were dispatched to a burglary in progress call in the 1700 block of Brentwood Street in Austin. Upon arrival, officers located Sidney and Billy Shelton, who you see to my left, deceased inside the residence from apparent trauma. Autopsies again were performed by the Travis County Medical Examiner's Office, and the manners of death for both individuals was determined to be homicide. During the investigation, detectives interviewed Timothy Scott Parlin, that's Timothy Scott Parlin, P-A-R-L-I-N, after receiving a tip that Parlin had previously performed work at the Blair residence. Investigative research led investigators to take a closer look at Parlin. Parlin was contacted several times for interviews by our homicide detectives. During one of the interviews, Parlin stated he was called to the area of Tamarack Trail to pick up a suspect by the name of Sean Grant Benalcazar. Benalcazar is spelled B-E-N-A-L-C-A-Z-A-R. On January 9th, 2015, investigators drove to Galveston, Texas, and interviewed Sean Gant Benalcazar at the Galveston Police Department. Gant Benalcazar subsequently confessed to the murder of Kathy Blair, and as a result, a capital murder charge was filed on him, on Sean Grant Benalcazar, on January 10th, 2015. And if you recall, Kathy Blair was a music teacher, and by all accounts, a very sweet member of our society, and sadly, she was taken from us. On Friday, January 16, 2015, Timothy Parlin was interviewed again. During that interview, Parlin admitted that he drove Sean Gant Benalcazar to Kathy Blair's residence the night of the murder. Parlin further admitted and Gant Benalcazar that he and Gant Benalcazar had committed another burglary late last year in South Austin. In that burglary, Parlin admitted he drove Gant Benalcazar and stood watch while Gant Benalcazar entered the residence. At this time, Timothy Parlin has been charged with burglary of a habitation, a second-degree felony, in connection with the South Austin burglary. Parlin remains in jail on that charge. During an interview with Parlin on January 21st, 2015, Parlin admitted he drove Gant Benalcazar to the area of 1705 Brentwood Drive, dropped him off, and then waited for him to return. Parlin said that when Grant Benalcazar returned, he was in possession of property that investigators believe was taken from the home of Billy and Sidney Sheldon in the course of the commission of the murders and the brutal murders of these two beautiful people. Benalcazar has been charged with capital murder for the murder of Kathy Blair, and yesterday Timothy Parlin was charged with second-degree felony burglary of a residence in which we believe he and Benalcazar committed on November 26, 2014. Investigators further believe that Timothy Parlin and Sean Gant Benalcazar were actively involved in the burglary of the Sheldons' home and the deaths of Billy and Sidney Sheldon. These investigations are ongoing, and detectives continue to pursue all leads and information related to the incidents that I just described. Ultimately, these cases will be presented to the Travis County District Attorney's Office for presentation to a grand jury. We continue to work very closely with the Travis County DA's office to present the most complete criminal investigation possible, and it goes without saying that a lot of work remains to be done on these investigations. It is critical for this community to note the Austin Police Department is still requesting the public's assistance with any information in reference to any of the cases that I just described. The two homicide cases and the burglary case that I described earlier. If you've received any property, from either Timothy Scott Parlin or Sean Gant Benalcazar, and I don't care if you're a pawn shop, I don't care if you're just a person walking down the street, we're not interested in you. We're interested in bringing justice to the families of three people that have brutally been taken from us. Please come forward. Please come forward. Search your heart, and if you have received any property from any one of these individuals that you see right here in front of me, I'm calling on you today to come forward and tell us where that property is, when you received it, who you received it from, so we can continue to strengthen our case. Anyone with information is urged to please call the homicide tip line at 512-477-3588, 512-477-3588, or Crime Stoppers at 512-472-TIPS, T-I-P-S, 512-472-TIPS, T-I-P-S. I want to say one last thing to the community. We are very confident that the suspects that you see before you are absolutely responsible for all three homicides, all three deaths. And now what we're doing is putting together the case. We already have charges on one, and now we're putting together the case for the next two. There are people out there listening right now that I know have received property. There's either a business or individual that received stolen property from these two suspects, and it's incumbent upon you to help us bring justice to these victims and to their families. And again, we urge you to come forward. We're not interested in you, we're interested in justice for people brutally killed. The last thing I want to say is, I've said it before and I'll say it again, we are one of the safest cities in the United States when it comes to violent crime, but we are one of the worst cities when it comes to property crime. Part of the reason of that challenge is that often we as a police department identify suspects that are engaged in habitual burglary, and too often our jurors don't see this as a crime where people belong in prison. I've said it before and I say it again. Any time a person is willing to break into somebody's home, violate the sanctity of their home, every time that we have a burglary or a residence in this city, we are one incident closer to a brutal murder, a brutal aggravated assault, or a brutal aggravated sexual assault. It is a matter of the laws of average, the laws of averages, right? Sooner or later, statistics will show us that statistically, the more burglaries you have, the more burglaries we allow people to get away with, the greater the chances are of this happening. And so I will just say that if sometime you're in front of in that jury box, don't be thinking about, if this guy just goes out and walks scot-free, am I going to have this happen the next time they break into a home and they find a couple asleep in their bed or in their home and brutally murder them? That's all I've got to say, and I'll open up to any questions.
Chief, are you confident that there is no one else involved in the Shelton's murders that are still on the loose in terms of the actual crime?
We are as confident as we can possibly be that there's no danger to the community in terms of anyone involved in these homicides.
Can you talk about their MO or what you think it may have been? Was the burglary the primary motivation, and then if there were people in the house, they were willing to kill them?
I'm not going to talk about motivation because these are open homicide investigations, and I'm not going to say anything that may later on jeopardize these cases.